Tiny Tim. Let me break its leg.
Okay, hello everybody. It's very festive. I've got it in my head that I haven't pressed record now. We tried to do this last week and it was a complete disaster. I messed it up.
She did.
I did press record.
It's all Maddie's fault.
It is all my fault, but I'm more like present today, so that's good. And it's a very festive Christmas story reading. I'm with Liam Shardlow and Chris Meekings, and Chris.
Christmas ghost stories.
Show us your Christmas ghost story. Sorry.
Apparently, Christmas ghost stories.
It is Christmas because that's a very festive thing here. It's a tradition with M.R. James and all that. Show us your Christmas jumper.
I've got a Christmas jumper on with Rudolph.
Yay! And Chimpy's dressed like a Victorian murderer, so that fits with the theme very well.
Shiny buttons.
Oh God!
Oh my God! That's amazing. In a way.
Christmas jumper wins.
Okay, so Chris is going to do a story of his, and Danny Brown, I'm going to insert the clip of her reading her story, very professionally, at the end.
Don't insert Danny Brown.
I'm not. No. I'm going to insert her story. I'll insert her story, everything will be fine. But no medical mishaps today. So Chris, are you going to start with your festive story?
I shall start with my ghost story.
Okay, and me and Chimpy are going to do stories that we like, which are not ours, but
yes,
the others are doing theirs. So
this is a story that I wrote. It's actually one of the original stories I wrote a long time ago, and it doesn't have a title, mainly because the title that it does have is wanky, because I was very young when I wrote this.
Of course, some of us never grow out of the wanky phase, but
no,
we all go through it.
This really does have a wanky title, so I'm not calling it that. So anyway, shall I begin?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you sitting comfortably?
I am actually.
I shall begin. Joanna Kerr was dead, and she was not enjoying it one little bit. The day had started out as a rather good one. Jo, she was always Jo, very rarely Joanna, that would be far too formal, had woken up a full 5 minutes before her alarm was set to go off, and this was always a sign of a good day ahead. She tumbled out of her single room like a proud rooster and bustled her way across the landing to the bathroom, whilst she was still in her silk pyjamas. Her husband, Winston, was at the head of the stairs, having emerged from his bedroom fully 15 minutes before her. He was already dressed in his suit trousers and white starched shirt, and was standing at the mirror swinging his tie over itself into the banker's noose. "Good morning, dear," he said in his clipped, scratchy voice as Jo passed him by on her way to the bathroom. She stopped and straightened his tie and looked at her husband. With his large forehead, prominent underbite, impressive chin and small piggy nose, Winston resembled the sole of a foot in glasses. He kissed her on the cheek, and it was a good job that he had been through the bathroom already. His breath smelled of mint toothpaste, and Jo was pleased. Some mornings he'd kissed her and his breath would smell of stale whatever they'd had for dinner the night before, chicken burritos or lasagna. If Winston kissed her and he hadn't brushed his teeth, that was, well, yucky, and the indication of a bad day ahead. "Good morning, Winston," she replied, kissed her husband on the cheek, and went to the bathroom to brush her own teeth. The breakfast table was laid out like a military map as Jo marched into the kitchen. Winston was already seated at the table, the Financial Times spread out in front of him. His toast sat on a plate with a half-moon bite taken out through it. Jo had dressed in her tight green jumper and beige skirt. She set the whole thing off with a blood-red neckerchief. Winston raised his eyes from his paper and gave her a smile and poured her a cup of coffee, as he had done every day since they were married. "The pound is down and the dollar is up and the euro is stable. I think I can make some money today," Winston said, without removing his eyes from the paper. Winston was a banker. At least Jo thought of him as a banker, or something that rhymed with it anyway. She began to pour her muesli into the bowl and noticed the corner of the box was gnawed. "Winston," she said, "we have mice." "That's nice, dear," he said, rather absently, and then, almost to himself, "Gold is rather strong at the moment." "You are not listening." "I was listening," he replied. "We have mice." "Well, I did ask you if you wanted a cat." "A cat?" she spluttered. "A cat? How can we have a cat when we have Attila?" Attila, the budgie, was at that moment hopefully pecking at his cuttlefish bone in his bell cage. Winston looked wistfully into the distance. "Ah, yes, Attila. And besides," continued Joe, almost without taking a breath, "cats are horrible, smelly things that scratch up the furniture, and I'm not having my dear mother's whatnot abused." "Ah," said Winston once again, as he considered the price of orange juice. "There's only one answer. Buy a trap. You'll have to get one on your way back from work." "Yes, dear," he sighed, and began to study the racing form which was hidden within the pages of his Financial Times. The vast majority of the rest of the morning had passed in a haze of phone calls to her acquaintances around the town. Jo was never one to gossip, but she did like to be kept abreast of the latest news. And then, after 3 hours of conversation, Jo had decided to do the housework. The washing basket had been heavy and full to overbrimming with dirty laundry. Jo hated doing the laundry, but she would have hated having a maid rather more. A maid might have led Winston's eyes to straying. She might not be sleeping with the man anymore, but they were, after all, still married. The landing was laminate flooring, and it was polished shiny and light brown like a calf's skin, and Joe's view was blocked by the basket. The rogue sock lay on the top step like an adder in the path of a horse. The world spun helter-skelter as Joe careened down the stairs. She was still alive halfway down. The sudden crack came from the base of her skull. Oh, there was no pain.
Sound effects.
The world simply began to draw in from the edges like turning off an old television set, until all that was left was a bright dot and then a moment of utter blackness. Jo sat on the stairs looking at her own rapidly cooling corpse and cried for a full hour before it occurred to her that her eyes could no longer produce tears. She was still wrapped up in the logistics of a spirit crying when she began to feel a tug in her guts. Jo was halfway down the hall on autopilot, heading to the kitchen for a cup of tea, when she felt the sickening slosh in her stomach. Ice-hot fingers began to grab at her intestines and pull through her spine. She clutched at the banisters to stop from falling and hauled herself back to the stairs for a sit-down. As she approached her own corpse, the feelings began to ease and eventually vanished 5 feet from her cooling body. Attila chirped and twittered in his cage. "Quiet, Attila. Mummy's a bit injured at the moment," said the shade of Jo. The bird took no notice and continued to flit around his cage like a demented bluebottle, toppling bird dirt and feathers. "Attila," said Jo, stepping towards the bird. Her guts churned with fire and ice again, and she retreated back into the hall. So, Jo realized, she couldn't leave the vicinity of her body. She looked at herself lying at the foot of the stairs. The chilling cadaver laid on its front, its knees hitched up to its chin and its bum stuck in the air. A small lump of broken vertebrae could be seen at the base of her skull, and it was bruising brownly. A small trickle of blood leaked from her left ear, running in rivulets through the gaps in the laminate flooring. Ooh. Jo didn't like the way she looked at all. She was dead as a dead thing. Damn, she was going to miss the golf social on Saturday and the Pinkertons' wedding anniversary. She was going to cry again. She tried to pull herself together. Her mother had not raised her to be a moaning Minnie. She was a ghost, and she'd better bloody get used to it. Shouldn't there be some sort of white light I'm supposed to head towards? There was no reply from the ether. Jo decided to wait. There was very little alternative. She couldn't move very far from her corpse, and nothing else seemed to be anything that she could do. Winston would be back from work soon. Maybe he'd know what to do, if she could speak to him. Winston didn't return for another 2 hours, but Jo spent the time trying to move further and further away from her body. Was it still her body now that she had vacated it? She managed to move 10 feet away from it before the sickening started again. Then there seemed to be some sort of invisible tether linking her to her body. She heard Winston's car pull up in the driveway and then the crunch of his shoes on the gravel. "Hello, dear," chirped Winston as he entered the hallway. He hung his bowler hat on the rack, took his shoes off and wandered into the kitchen straight past her corpse. "What? Did you have a nice day, darling?" he asked, and then, without getting a reply, "Oh, that's nice." He breezed through the letters that he picked up and totally didn't notice his wife's position. "What are you? Oh, you're looking for the mouse. I'd forgotten to get the trap, and after you told me this morning, I'll go and get one this instant." And with that, Winston left the house and his deceased wife and went to the hardware store for a mousetrap. Jo's jaw would have hit the floor if it wasn't for the fact that it had hit the floor and broken several hours earlier. The double-blind, bloody stupid, ignorant ass! Jo was fuming, almost livid. Her husband had not noticed her corpse at the foot of the stairs. "Miss Joanna Kerr?" said a voice behind her. Jo turned to face the voice. It was a man dressed in a dark blue business suit with a white Renaissance-style shirt and large leather boots. His hair was brown and shoulder-length and curly. In his hands he held a very official-looking digital clipboard. He had the kind of face that would make Mother Superiors recant God and go and live in sin in Droitwich. "Miss Joanna Kerr?" questioned the man again. "You can see me? Who are you?" "I am the concierge. Are you Miss Joanna Kerr?" "I am, and it's Jo, actually, if you don't mind." "Jo?" said the man, making a note on his digital clipboard. "So your name, as you prefer it, is Jo Kerr?" "Yes, what's wrong with that?" The man tutted and made a note on his clipboard. No visible sense of humour. "What's going on? Am I dead? How can you see me?" "Mrs. Kerr, I am the concierge to the afterlife, and you have indeed died. There was a bit of a mix-up with the paperwork. We've only just been able to process your request for eternal salvation." The concierge typed at his clipboard. "We seem to have a bit of an impasse here." "Really? Why?" "Well, you seem to have led a rather good and charitable life. You've given regularly to the church funds. You believed in God and prayed to him. You've kept all 10 of the commandments. Very well done on that, by the way. But there is a note here from St. Peter. It says that although you have kept all the commandments and been very charitable, he says you're not really the type we're looking for in heaven." "What?" The concierge had the good grace to look sheepish. "You aren't really what we call our core demographic. The Big P says that you're actually not a very nice person, and he's going to try and keep you out on that technicality, as he did for Thomas Torquemada and Charles Darwin. I can't tell you the paperwork it caused." "I'm going to be kept out of heaven on a technicality?" "Well, it's a possibility. It's your attitude to your husband that's let you down." "Winston? I knew he'd muck it up for me. I never should have married him in the first place." "It's exactly that kind of attitude which has caused the problem," sniffed the concierge, as Winston returned from the shop. "Darling, I'm back. Oh, you're still down there." "The fool. Mother always said I should have married a doctor, but I didn't listen. Banking's a good deal, I said. Oh, she'll be rolling in her grave." "I don't think she will, Mrs. Kerr. I believe she was sent to the other place too." "Jo, are you all right?" asked Winston in a concerned voice. Dropped to one knee. And now look at me, 45 and being denied entrance to heaven, and it's all his fault. He never listened to me. I had needs, you know." "Jo, it's time," said the concierge. The floor split in the living room as a gaping pit of fire and fissured its way across the floor. Sounds of screaming and the smell of molten brimstone filled the air. Great gouts of fire and lava sprang up like arterial blood. And this is where you've been scheduled to spend eternity, said the concierge. His face was lit from below and resembled a hideous death mask. What if I don't want to go? Well, we can't have that. It would cause far too much paperwork. She looked at the pit and the fire and the screaming and the echoes of the hundreds of thousands of damned souls agonizing in their torment. The concierge's arms reached out for her to throw her into the pit. The WI self-defense classes swung into action then, and she pitched the concierge over her shoulder, sending him hurtling into the fire. This will cause an awful lot of paperwork, he screamed as he fell. Winston sat by the body of his wife and checked her pulse with growing alarm. Joe, honey, can you hear me? But she wasn't going anywhere. Oh, Winston would pay for this. He'd ruined her chances to get into heaven, and that was unforgivable. Yes, I can hear you, and I will never forgive you for this. And now, honey, I'm going to haunt you. You'll never be rid of me.
Is that the end? Yay. Can you tell me, does the husband go to hell too?
I don't know.
When he died. It needs a sequel. What?
I don't know if behind you seems to be a copy of Mayfair magazine.
Yeah. Well,
me?
oh, that lady's boobies have probably been out the whole time, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't got a problem with it, but
No, I'm just about YouTube's policies.
YouTube has got issues, hasn't it? So, allow me to explain. Bill.
Is there an explanation?
There actually is a genuine explanation. So Bill does the, graphic design for like phone sex magazine, like the stuff that goes in magazines for people to ring up and do phone sex. He does all the graphic design of all that. So that's got his adverts in it. Which I could show you.
Bill's adverts, are you? Is that what you're doing?
That's right, yeah. So I'll just turn her over. Bye bye, lady. Oh look, cheap wank lines, that's even better, isn't it? Oh, this is supposed to be a classy Christmas thing. I'm in my pyjama trousers and I'm moving a bloody porn mag out of the way.
Bizarro Christmas, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh God. Oh well, it's all, the cat's out of the bag now. Everything, the whole sheer thing has been ripped off. We can see the underbelly, the writhing. Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Or the pink.
Oh no, that definitely makes
That
sense.
purple.
The purple.
Yeah.
Oh, now it's blue.
Oh no, the blue that suits it. Oh, red. Every single one of them. Just cycle through them repeatedly.
I don't have the remote. I think I could do just darker.
Do darker.
That's the permanent one.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Okay. Shall I be next? Shall I be
Yeah.
mother? Okay. I forgot my water. The Bus Conductor by E.F. Benson. My friend Hugh Granger and I had just returned from a 2 days visit in the country, where we'd been staying in a house of sinister repute, which was supposed to be haunted by ghosts of a particularly fearsome and truculent sort. The house itself was all that such a house should be, Jacobean and oak-panelled, with long dark passages and high vaulted rooms. It stood also very remote, and was encompassed by a wood of sombre pines that muttered and whispered in the dark, and all the time that we were there a southwesterly gale with torrents of scalding rain had prevailed, so that by day and night weird voices moaned and fluted in the chimneys. A company of uneasy spirits held colloquy among the trees, and sudden tattoos and tappings beckoned from the window panes. But in spite of these surroundings, which were sufficient in themselves, one would almost say, to spontaneously generate occult phenomena, nothing of description had happened. I'm bound to add also that my own state of mind was peculiarly well adapted to receive or even to invent the sights and sounds we had gone to seek, for I was, I confess, during the whole time that we were there, in a state of abject apprehension, and lay awake both nights through hours of terrified unrest, afraid of the dark, yet more afraid of what a lighted candle might show me. Hugh Granger, on the evening after our return to town, had dined with me, and after dinner our conversation, as was natural, soon came back to these entrancing topics. "But why you go ghost-seeking I cannot imagine," he said, "because your teeth were chattering and your eyes starting out of your head the whole time you were here, from sheer fright, or do you like being frightened?" Hugh, though generally intelligent, is dense in certain ways. This is one of them. "Why, of course I like being frightened," I said. "I want to be made to creep and creep and creep. Fear is the most absorbing and luxurious of emotions. One forgets all else if one is afraid." "Well, the fact that neither of us saw anything," he said, "confirms what I've always believed." "And what have you always believed?" "That these phenomena are purely objective, not subjective, and that one's state of mind has nothing to do with the perception that perceives them, nor have circumstances or surroundings anything to do with them either. Look at Osburton. It has the reputation of being a haunted house for years, and it certainly has all the accessories of one. Look at yourself, too, with all your nerves on edge, afraid to look round or light a candle for fear of seeing something. Surely there was the right man in the right place then, if ghosts are subjective." He got up and lit a cigarette, and looking at him, Hugh is about 6 feet high, and as broad as he is long, I felt a retort on my lips, for I could not help my mind going back to a certain period in his life, when, from some cause which, as far as I knew, he had never told anybody, he had become a mere quivering mass of disordered nerves. Oddly enough, at the same moment, and for the first time, he began to speak of it himself. "You may reply that it was not worth my while to go either," he said, "because I was so clearly the wrong man in the wrong place. But I wasn't. You, for all your apprehensions and expectancy, have never seen a ghost. But I have, though I'm the last person in the world you would have thought likely to do so, and though my nerves are steady enough again now, it knocked me all to bits." He sat down again in his chair. "No doubt you remember my going to bits," he said, "and since I believe that I'm sound again now, I should rather like to tell you about it. But before, I couldn't. I couldn't speak of it at all to anybody. Yet there ought to have been nothing frightening about it. What I saw was certainly a most useful and friendly ghost. But it came from the shaded side of things. It looked suddenly out of the night and the mystery with which life is surrounded. I want first to tell you, quite shortly, my theory about ghost seeing," he continued, "and I can explain it best by a simile, an image. Imagine then that you and I and everybody in the world are like people whose eye is directly opposite a little tiny hole in a sheet of cardboard, which is continually shifting and revolving and moving about. Back to back with that sheet of cardboard is another, which also, by laws of its own, is in perpetual but independent motion. In it too there is another hole, and when, fortuitously it would seem, these two holes, the one through which we're always looking and the other in the spiritual plane, come opposite one another, we see through, and then only do the sights and sounds of the spiritual world become visible or audible to us. With most people these holes never come opposite each other during their life, but at the hour of death they do, and then they remain stationary. That, I fancy, is how we pass over. Now, in some natures, these holes are comparatively large, and we're constantly coming into opposition. Clairvoyants, mediums are like that. But as far as I know, I had no clairvoyant or mediumistic powers at all. I therefore am the sort of person who long ago made up his mind that he would never see a ghost. It was, so to speak, an incalculable chance that my minute spy hole should come into opposition with the other. But it did, and it knocked me out of time. I'd heard such theory before, and though Hugh put it rather picturesquely, there was nothing in the least convincing or practical about it. It might be so, or again, it might not. I hope your ghost was more original than your theory, said I, in order to bring him to the point. Yes, I think it was. You shall judge. I put on more coal and poked up the fire. Hugh has got, so I've always considered, a great talent for telling stories, and that sense of drama which is so necessary for the narrator. Indeed, before now, I have suggested to him that he should take this up as a profession, sit by the fountain in Piccadilly Circus when times are, as usual, bad, and tell stories to the passers-by in the street, Arabian fashion, for reward. The most part of mankind, I am aware, do not like long accounts, but to the few, among whom I number myself, who really like to listen to lengthy stories of experiences, Hugh is an ideal narrator. I do not care for his theories or for his similes, but when it comes to facts, to things that happened, I like him to be lengthy. Go on, please, and slowly, I said. Brevity may be the soul of wit, but it is the ruin of storytelling. I want to hear when and where and how it all was, and what you had for lunch, and where you dined, and what... Hugh began. It was the 24th of June, just 18 months ago, he said. I'd let my flat, you may remember, and came up from the country to stay with you for a week. We'd dined alone here. I couldn't help interrupting. Did you see the ghost here, I asked, in this square little box of a house in a modern street? I was in the house when I saw it. I hugged myself in silence. We had dined alone here in Graham Street, he said, and after dinner I went out to some party and you stopped at home. At dinner your man did not wait, and when I asked where he was you told me he was ill, and I thought changed the subject rather abruptly. You gave me your latchkey when I went out, and on coming back I found you'd gone to bed. There were, however, several letters for me which required answers. I wrote them there and then, and posted them at the pillar box opposite. So I suppose it was rather late when I went upstairs. You'd put me in the front room on the 3rd floor overlooking the street, a room which I thought you generally occupied yourself. It was a very hot night, and though there'd been a moon when I started to my party, on my return the whole sky was cloud-covered, and it both looked and felt as if we might have a thunderstorm before morning. I was feeling very sleepy and heavy, and it was not till after I'd gone to bed that I noticed by the shadows of the window frames on the blind that only one of the windows was open. But it did not seem worthwhile to get out of bed in order to open it, though I felt rather airless and uncomfortable, and I went to sleep. What time it was when I awoke, I do not know, but it was certainly not yet dawn, and I never remember being conscious of such an extraordinary stillness as prevailed. There was no sound either of foot passengers or wheeled traffic. The music of life appeared to be absolutely mute. But now, instead of being sleepy and heavy, I felt, though I must have slept an hour or two at most, since it was not yet dawn, perfectly fresh and wide awake, and the effort which had seemed not worth making before, that of getting out of bed and opening the other window, was quite easy now, and I pulled up the blind, threw it wide open and leaned out, for somehow I parched and pined for air. Even outside the oppression was very noticeable, and though, as you know, I'm not easily given to feeling the mental effects of climate, I was aware of an awful creepiness coming over me. I tried to analyse it away, but without success. The past day had been pleasant. I looked forward to another pleasant day tomorrow, and yet I was full of some nameless apprehension. I felt, too, dreadfully lonely in the stillness before dawn. Then I heard suddenly, and not very far away, the sound of some approaching vehicle. I could distinguish the tread of 2 horses walking at a slow foot's pace. They were, though not yet visible, coming up the street, and yet this indication of life did not abate that dreadful sense of loneliness which I've spoken of. Also, in some dim, unformulated way, that was coming seemed to have something to do with the cause of my oppression. Then the vehicle came into sight. At first I could not distinguish what it was. Then I saw that the horses were black and had long tails, and that what they dragged was made of glass and had a black frame. It was a hearse, empty. It was moving up the side of the street. It stopped at your door. Then the obvious solution struck me. You'd said at dinner that your man was ill, and you were, I thought, unwilling to speak more about his illness. No doubt, so I imagined now, he was dead, and for some reason, perhaps you didn't want me knowing anything about it, you were having the body removed at night. This, I must tell you, passed through my mind quite instantaneously, and it did not occur to me how unlikely it really was, before the next thing happened. I was still leaning out of the window, and I remember also wondering, yet only momentarily, how odd it was that I saw things, or rather the one thing I was looking at, so very distinctly. Of course there was a moon behind the clouds, but it was curious how every detail of the hearse and horses was visible. There was only one man, the driver, with it, and the street was otherwise absolutely empty. It was at him I was looking now. I could see every detail of his clothes, but from where I was, so high above him, I couldn't see his face. He had on grey trousers, brown boots, a black coat buttoned all the way up, and a straw hat. Over his shoulder there was a strap, which seemed to support some sort of little bag. He looked exactly like... well, from my description, what did he look like? Why, a bus conductor, I said instantly. So I thought, and even while I was thinking this, he looked up at me. He had a rather long, thin face, and on his left cheek there was a mole with a growth of dark hair on it. All this was as distinct as if it had been noonday, and as if I was within a yard of him. But so instantaneous was all that take so long in the telling, I had not time to think it strange that the driver of a hearse should be so unfunereally dressed. Then he touched his hat to me and jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Just room for one inside, sir," he said. There was something so odious, so coarse, so unfeeling about this, that I instantly drew my head in, pulled the blind down again, and then, for what reason I do not know, turned on the electric light in order to see what time it was. The hands of my watch pointed to 11:30. It was then, for the first time, I think, that a doubt crossed my mind as to the nature of what I'd just seen. But I put out the light again, got into bed, and began to think. We had dined. I had gone to a party. I'd come back and written letters. I'd gone to bed and slept. So how could it be 11:30? Or what 11:30 was it? Then another easy solution struck me. My watch must have stopped, but it had not. I could hear it ticking. There was stillness and silence again. I expected every moment to hear muffled footsteps on the stairs, footsteps moving slowly and smallly under the weight of a heavy burden. But from inside the house there was no sound whatever. Outside too there was the same dead silence while the hearse waited at the door, and the minutes ticked on, and at length I began to see a difference in the light in the room and knew that dawn was beginning to break outside. But how it had happened then, that if the corpse was to be removed at night, it had not gone, and that the hearse still waited when morning was already coming. Presently I got out of bed again, and with a strong sense of physical shrinking I went to the window and pulled back the blind. The dawn was coming fast. The whole street was lit by that silver hueless light of morning, but there was no hearse there. Once again I looked at my watch. It was just 4:15, but I would swear that not half an hour had passed since it told me that it was 11:30. Then a curious double sense, as if I was living in the present and at the same moment had been living in some other time, came over me. It was dawn on June 25th, and the street, as natural, was empty. But a little while ago the driver of a hearse had spoken to me, and it was 11:30. What was that driver? To what plane did he belong? And again, what 11:30 was it that I'd seen recorded on the dial of my watch? And then I told myself that the whole thing had been a dream. But if you asked me whether I believed what I'd told myself, I must confess I did not. Your man did not appear at breakfast next morning, nor did I see him again before I left that afternoon. I think if I had, I should have told you about all this. But it was still possible, you see, that what I'd seen was a real hearse, driven by a real driver, for all the ghastly gaiety of the face that had looked up to mine, and the levity of his pointing hand. I might possibly have fallen asleep soon after seeing him, and slumbered through the removal of the body and the departure of the hearse, so I didn't speak of it to you. There was something wonderfully straightforward and prosaic in all this. Here there were no Jacobean houses, oak-panelled and surrounded by weeping pine trees, and somehow the very absence of suitable surroundings made the story more impressive. But for a moment a doubt assailed me. "Don't tell me it was a dream," I said. "I don't know whether it was or not. I can only say that I believe myself to have been wide awake. In any case, the rest of the story is odd." "I went out of town again that afternoon," he continued, "and I may say that I don't think that even for a moment did I get the haunting sense of what I'd seen or dreamed that night out of my mind. It was present to me as always, as some vision unfulfilled. It was as if some clock had struck the 4 quarters, and I was still waiting to hear what the hour would be. Exactly a month afterwards I was in London again, but only for the day. I arrived at Victoria about 11 and took the Underground to Sloane Square in order to see if you were in town and would give me lunch. It was a baking hot morning, and I intended to take a bus from the King's Road as far as Graham Street. There was one standing at the corner just as I came out of the station, but I saw that the top was full, and the inside appeared to be full also. Just as I came up to it, the conductor, who I suppose had been inside, collecting fares or what-not, came out onto the step within a few feet of me. He wore grey trousers, brown boots, a black coat buttoned, a straw hat, and over his shoulder was a strap on which hung his little machine for punching tickets. I saw his face too. It was a face of the driver of the hearse, with a mole on the left cheek. Then he spoke to me, jerking his thumb over his shoulder. "Just room for one inside, sir," he said. At that a sort of panic terror took possession of me, and I knew I gesticulated wildly with my arms and cried "No!" But at that moment I was living not in the hour that was then passing, but in that hour which had passed a month ago, when I leaned from the window of your bedroom here just before dawn broke. At this morning too I knew that my spy-hole had been opposite the spy-hole into the spiritual world. What I had seen there had some significance, now being fulfilled, beyond the significance of the trivial happenings of today and tomorrow. The powers of which we know so little were visibly working before me, and I stood there on the pavement, shaking and trembling. I was opposite the post office at the corner, and just as the bus started, my eye fell on the clock in the window there. I need not tell you what the time was. Perhaps I need not tell you the rest, for you probably conjecture it, since you will not have forgotten what happened at the corner of Sloane Square at the end of July, the summer before last. The bus pulled out from the pavement into the street in order to get round a van that was standing in front of it. At the moment that it came down King's Road, a big motor going at a hideously dangerous pace crashed full into the bus, burrowing into it as a gimlet burrows into a board. He paused. And that's my story, he said. Okay, so that was E.F. Benson. Well done, E.F.
That is his story.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is Ghost Puncher by Anonymous. Curated from the 4chan boards, so you know what to expect.
It's been edited.
Yeah, I've edited the crap out of it. Yeah. Bloody scum.
Yes,
Anyway,
the terrible is gone.
Friend not in story tells us about a place to get palm readings. Lifting buddy and I go to get palms read. Show up at this shady ass place at 10 in the morning wearing our workout gear. Stereotypically scraggy gypsy lady shakes our hands and seats us at the table with a crystal ball. Asks who want to go first. My Hispanic heritage kicks in, and I nope out at the last minute. Friend chads up to the plate. Woman grabs his hand. He flexes slightly. Woman goes from smiling to horrified. Starts grabbing and studying his hand like a last will. Feeling pretty weird, man. Tells my friend he's got something following him. Ask him if he did any Ouija voodoo shit. Says he smashed a hole in the wall while he was drunk lifting at home. Says there was some type of decorative skull behind it that he now uses as decoration in his bedroom. Gypsy lets us leave without paying. At the gym 30 minutes later. Spotting friend while he benches. Some newbie dumbass is curling next to us. Like, no joke, 6 inches away from us. Dude slips up and swings a 20s holding at friend's head. Throws the bar up and ducks just in time. Almost impale myself trying to catch the bar. Newbie apologizing while friend gets back up and I'm still shitting myself. Tell friend he should go home. Friend looks unfazed and wants to continue lifting. Leave to go to Abila's sister's house to get some sage and silver. Go back to the gym and give it to my friend. The next day. Friend looks happier than normal. Tells me some shit went down at his house. Says the power was dead even though his bills were paid and the rest of the neighborhood had power. Heard rattling of silverware. Uses flashlight app to see. Saw a silhouette of someone crawl under the kitchen counter. Nothing under the counter, not even shelves. Friend doesn't believe in Ouija shit and believes it's an intruder or an animal. Friend grabs his pull-up bar ready for some sweet fit justice. Yells obscenities while patrolling his house. Says he sees what looks like a small humanoid crouched in his weight room. Gives 0 fucks and tosses the pull-up bar at the window. Shatters like lanky kneecaps squatting. Thing nowhere in sight. Friend then starts to consider Ouija shit. Calls other friend for advice. Our lifting group has some odd characters. Johnny answers and tells him to burn the sage and carry the silver. Says he'll be by with some holy water later. And dutifully drops it off. I'll call my grandmother to help tomorrow. She's one of those medium people. Friend sits down on his couch while the house smells like old. Watches American Dad. Looks at the sage, dried up and out. Goes to his pocket for the silver. Fucking melted. Instead of warm, it was cold. Thought to see something dart back and forth across the room. TV goes off, static comes on. This high-pitched screaming fills the house. Friend gets mildly annoyed. Walks over to the weight room and smashes the skull against the fucking wall in one fluid motion. Like, imagine walking into the room, tipping over a vase, and then going back to what you were doing. He did that, except threw a skull against the wall. Says how shook, screaming got high pitched, and then stopped. Lights go off again. his numerous footsteps getting closer to him, tells me he's now mildly freaked out at this point. I'm very concerned, he said mildly. Says he doused himself in holy water and started swinging as hard as he could into the darkness. Only hears the wind breaking on his fists. Says he hears the footsteps getting further away from him. Screams, "Nuh-uh!" Starts running around his house and swinging in the darkness again. Fucks up his living room in the process. Tells me he swears he made contact with something fleshy a few times. Doesn't remember falling asleep. Wakes up and goes to gym to tell me this the next day. Friend goes outside to make frequent calls throughout his routines. Ask him if he's been trying to get in touch with a priest. Tells me he's been calling his home phone and leaving angry voice messages for the ghosts. Says he would buy a... No, we'll leave that. Friend goes home again. Fast forward a couple of days, looks completely normal. Ask Johnny if lifting buddy was alright. Tells me it's disturbing how well he is handling the situation. Says he went to lifting buddy's house to check up on the sitch. Feels a presence, but he feels scared. Lifting buddy walks out of his bathroom naked, wiping his ass with a Ouija board towel. Throws it on the floor, kicks it into the living room, and pours holy water on it before taking it outside to burn. Ask friend if he is hungry. Sure, he replies. Says he pulls out an open Ouija board he bought at Spencer's and uses it like a fucking cutting board. Says he repeatedly stabbed the knife into the board when he was not using it. Breaks the board in half after he's done chopping up the tomatoes and throws it in the trash. Washes his hands, then pisses in the trash can. Even I think this is disrespecting the spirits just a little bit too much. They both eat grilled chicken salad and Johnny leaves. Says on the way out, lifting buddy goes to the lifting room and puts another crucifix on the wall. Before yelling, "I'm putting Jesus on this wall and I'll be back to fucking masturbate on my bench while thinking about Lucifer's daughter." Punches a hole in the wall before leaving. Johnny calls his Abula that night. Abula goes to lifting buddy's house with a priest the next day. Says that Abula and priest were amazed/disturbed how lifting buddy was fighting the situation. Priest actually cowered and mired the lifting buddy pissing naked on a satanic Bible he bought at some shady bookstore. Tells priest he walked around naked a lot lately and talks shit about Satan. Priest leaves before cleansing. Abula stays to do her medium thing. Tries to contact the spirits. Says it was a group of entities that were very, very pissed off that their shrine was disturbed. Tells her that they have no power since lifting buddy isn't even remotely scared about anything they've done. Lifting buddy walks back into weight room with a dead snake. Abula says the entities scatter like roaches. Check out what I found on the street this morning. Takes a bite out of an apple. A fucking dead snake. Throws the snake on the floor, puts holy water and salt on it, kicks it into the carpet a few times before peeling it off, and throws it in the trash can in the kitchen. Abula is W2Fing with the man's mental strength or ignorance. Tries to contact the spirits again. They keep running from her. Finally manages to talk to one. Says they are scared of lifting buddy. Ghosts are fucking scared of my key friend. Abula asks what they could make them pass on. Says they did black magic to get revenge on some arsehole landlord from way back when. Says they had incriminating shit to shame his family within the wall with the skull. Abula tells lifting buddy what he needs to do. Lifting buddy goes into the weight room, makes the hole in the wall bigger by throwing a 15 through the wall, finds a folder with records of some sort. I'm not lying about any of this, I swear. Lifting buddy flips through the papers and wipes his balls with it. Abula, horrified, tells spirits to piss off and punches another hole in the wall. Total of 13 holes in the wall at this point. Abula says, "May God have mercy," in Spanish, then leaves. I go back to the lifting buddy's house a month later. Immediately, I go to the weight room. More holes than wall at this point. Destroyed AF. But like Halo descending from the heavens, the bench press and squatting rack are still there. I tried to contact the spirits. Nothing. Smile and ask my friend if he did what needed to be done. He tells my Abula he uncrumpled the papers and got the address of this bastard. Papers were from 60 years ago, so the guy was still alive, just old as dust. Finds the address of this guy in some sort of mansion, knocks on the door, wearing a "Get Swole You Must" Star Wars Yoda tank top, board shorts, pink sunglasses, and a backwards Chicago Bulls hat. Sorry. Johnny said lifting buddy went into a lot of detail for his wardrobe for this. Some scrawny white guy in his mid-30s opens the door. Lifting buddy holds out some papers and asks the person in the paper's name. "Hey Dad, someone's here to see you. He has documents." Lifting buddy lets himself in and finds the old man in his studies. "Who are you?" Notices the papers. "Where did you get that?" says the old man. Old man tries to grab at the papers. Lifting buddy punches the old man straight in the face. His dentures fly out. Says it was some shit out of a movie. Crouches in his face and sets the old man straight, Sherlock Holmes style. Guy's son runs in, jumps on lifting buddy's back. Lifting buddy stops mid-sentence, lets the guy down, then gut punches him until he hobbles out from and pukes in the hallway. Tells old man to set shit right or he'll be back for blood, and leaves. Fast forward a couple of days, various cars outside of lifting buddy's house. Thinks the old man has some friends and grabs his pull-up bar. Walks outside in his tank top and house shorts. Once again, very descriptive about his clothing. Various families are thanking him and giving him home-cooked foods. Thank him for getting their grandparents' properties back. The documents were apparently deeds swindled out by the old man. Families say, "We'll never forget you, Spiel," and leave. Friends look into the Tupperware. Nothing but calories and carbs, cookies, biscuits, gumbo. Throws it all away and goes back to his lifting room. Sees old man's name in the news a few days later. Apparently, he was hated by the community for being an absolute dick. Somehow, only heard about him now. News doesn't disclose how he died. Doesn't know if it was lifting buddy doing more damage than he thought, the ghost getting their revenge, or natural causes. Hasn't had any paranormal problems since then, except for one. Says he went to the kitchen for a late night non-cheating snack and saw full body apparitions. They smiled at him, says he grabbed an apple, nodded his head while taking a bite, and walked back to his bedroom. He stops halfway around. "Holy fuck, you guys are real?" Spirits fade away while smiling. Lifting buddy goes to sleep.
Well done. So yes, that was very good. We've done our stories. Now it's time for Danny Brown to be inserted cleverly to do hers. So thanks everyone. Merry Christmas. Hope you all enjoy the things and stuff. Okay, bye. Chin chin.
Hello, I'm Danny Brown, the Queen of Filth, and I will be reading one of my own stories, Glass, for British Bizarro community's Christmas thing, 2021. I'm a bit further along on my Christmas jumper than I was last year. So yeah, I've started the second side, but I have been very, very sick and quite busy. Right, let's get, so I'm sitting with my tree to make things a bit more Christmassy. Let's get to the story then. The miniature nativity glistened on top of fake snow on the mantel. Samantha bent down for a closer look. Another new addition since she left to chase her fortune in the city. 3 wise men were meant to glitter in gaudy colors over the scene. The figurines stood in plain glass, poking out from plastic garland without any eyes. They didn't seem in the mood to sing praises to the newborn king. Hand blown, her mother said. Samantha jumped. I didn't hear you come in. The doorbell rang, taking Samantha and her mother away from the nativity and the candy canes hanging from the garland. Those were real, at least. In regulation, artificial Christmas, mint, red and white. Carolers sang with Christmas cheer. Red noses from the cold poked out from underneath winter parkers, but the snow melted at sunrise. Samantha thought she could see pink powder flakes. Perfection was nothing more than a small-town illusion. This town projected the image of keeping their noses clean, but never too good to look the role of winter caroler. She sniffled. Last week presented some intensity at work in the big city. Her nose itched with recent memories rushing to hit her bloodstream and tighten around her chest. Samantha looked over her shoulder. Her mother stamped on her foot to force her eyes back to the carolers. Tyler winked. He still harbored his childhood crush. Blue eyes twinkled beneath a reindeer Fair Isle hat knitted by his grandmother, Samantha assumed. She knitted him a new one every year. Beneath his parka, he'd be sweating through a hand-knitted sweater. She took an elbow to the ribs. Samantha grew soft on fast food and even faster dates in the city, while her mother turned her childhood bedroom into a gym. Her mother didn't really want her to return home. Airs and graces were a display for the small-town neighbors. She couldn't hear Tyler's voice amongst the other carolers. They blurred together with no chance of a solo going door to door. Tyler would never leave the town, the only son of the only funeral director. His destiny waited in the family business. Samantha needed more out of life, always chasing away an emptiness that nibbled on her insides late at night, displaying lilies on closed caskets with the boredom washed away with 1 pill per day. Didn't offer any chance to find out who she was. Her mother agreed without saying anything. Would you like some hot cocoa? Her mother asked the carolers during a break in the song. Samantha glared at her mother, her eyes ready to burst out of her head. Don't invite them in. The carolers accepted the offer. It was only made to sound polite. The same offer made in hundreds of towns, just like this one, dotted around the country. It could be printed on a postcard. It probably was, but with the slush and early winter mud photoshopped away. Tyler stepped inside behind the others. His eyes traced over Samantha's body. Samantha's mother didn't have details about the fast city life before matching Christmas onesies for the entire family. Samantha tried to pull the door shut, but Tyler's foot stood in the way. Samantha's mother ran off to warm the milk and put packaged Christmas delights onto a serving platter, leaving Samantha to close the door and ensure Toodles didn't get out. The golden retriever's claws hit the hardwood floor. Tyler paused to take off his hat. Samantha's cheeks puffed out with frustration as she fumbled for words. The dog had just been to the groomer's. She even smelt nice with a big gold-trimmed crimson Christmas ribbon wrapped around her collar. Samantha tried to close the door, but the funeral director's son was in the way. His icy blue eyes began to melt her frustration and transform into good cheer and instant love. He really grew up in the last few months. Goddamn dog, she mumbled and chased after her. Tyler watched from the open doorway. Samantha felt him mentally undressing her in the same way upper management made her skin crawl, but Tyler didn't make her skin crawl. At least she didn't think he did. Toodles, here, girl. The dog turned around and wagged her tail. The perfectly groomed tail fur managed to avoid the lawn mud. It was already traveling up her legs. Splatters of mud ran off the gold-trimmed Christmas ribbon, fastened onto her collar, and landed in her fur. The mud puddle at the bottom of the front yard hadn't frozen over yet. The slush lit up by the orange glow cast by the neighbors' windows and street lamps. Samantha ran in her Christmas slippers and slid. A car drove by. Headlights shone on Samantha, sat in the mud. Toodles wagged her tail halfway between the giant mud puddle and Samantha. Tyler ran behind Samantha, his boots splattering more mud. He looked down at her for a few seconds too long before helping her up. The zipper tucked on her onesie. It wouldn't go all the way up. Samantha held it closed as Tyler pulled her out of the lawn mud. Toodles stood still with her tail wagging and a big fat stupid grin on her face. Tyler whistled and the dog ran right up next to him. Samantha shook her hands In disgust, mud flew. Samantha winced as a big splatter hit Tyler in the nose. She waited for him to be angry, but he only laughed it off. Thank you, Samantha. I deserve that. Tyler smiled. His teeth were straight and very white. They weren't the teeth of his childhood. Samantha's eyes went cross, staring at them. You look a sight for sore eyes. His pink tongue pressed against his teeth as he spoke. Samantha didn't hear what he said. The mud on his nose dripped. The perfect postcard picture moment over if postcards contain mud instead of snow. Tyler's hand rested on Toodle's head. Samantha desired nothing more than to punch that grin off his face. He was being so nice, like he wasn't the same boy that cut her pigtails in 4th grade. Her own feelings churned around inside her, confused and searching for answers. The warm tidings of the season would soon be swallowed by mid-January depression. Would Tyler look as good then? Come on, let's get you cleaned up. Samantha didn't have any other choice. It was her house, or more, her parents' house, since she'd be staying in the guest room, her belongings donated to Goodwill. If she wanted to come home, she'd be forced to rent somewhere. He took off his coat and put it around her shoulders. The house is only a few steps away. He winked. The mud disappeared from his face as if by magic when she wasn't looking. Don't want you catching cold now, do we? His blue eyes twinkled in the orange glow cast by house lights and street lamps. It seemed weird to put her arms in the sleeves, but she did so anyways, satisfied that she was covered in mud. Enforced politeness ruled the picture-perfect town. No was an acceptable answer to the boy who chopped off her hair. Samantha shuddered, remembering the short bob cut when all the girls grew long, flowing locks. He led her up her parents' path to the porch. It used to be her path and her porch. Home gyms had appeal, though. At least the guest room had a new mattress from a box. Orange light changed to a welcoming warm yellow as they approached the open door. Toodles ran in. Toodles, no! Samantha's heart sank watching the mud-covered golden retriever run into the house with freshly waxed floors. It's okay. My mother will make me clean it. At least her mother didn't make her undress in front of the guests. Samantha was finally too old for that. Too far into her teenage years, where she expected to strip down by the open door. Mud should be illegal, which is why they lived in what must be the muddiest street in the muddiest town ever. She wanted nothing more than a shower, but her mother would see that as being rude, so she had to sit around sweating in Tyler's coat, next to the wood-burning stove as the carolers took up every other space in the living room. Her mother droned on about imaginings of Samantha's life in the big city and how she needed to settle down. Tyler wasn't paying any attention. Some of the old crew are back in town, he whispered. Everyone was too engrossed in stories of Sam's imagined life to pay any attention to them. We're having a bit of a soiree later. You should come. Samantha turned to look at him. He grew up. He grew into a man with twinkling eyes, fresh and young. Even the men her age had bags under their eyes in the big city. I'm not the same boy that cut your hair. That was stupid. His hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. Sure, she said. It beats sitting at what used to be her home. Curiosity would be satisfied tonight under the mistletoe, only for January regret. 9 o'clock, I'll pick you up. Thanks. If the carolers would hurry up with their cocoa and packaged Christmas delights, she'd have just about enough time to clean herself up. Presents of socks and soap sets sat underneath the tree in another picture-perfect postcard. It would have been a moment if she weren't sweating through her mud-covered Christmas onesie and into Tyler's coat. Samantha waited by the door with Tyler's coat. The car honked. Have fun, her mother called. Don't wait up, she replied. The music from her youth blared in the barn. The same bands were still turning out hits and selling out arena tours. The songs still sounded the same, dripping warm nostalgia through the cold night. She didn't return home after college. She accepted the first job offer that would take her away from all of this and thrust into her adult life. The little postcard town was so dull. Its only claim to fame was a presidential candidate that stopped by once. An entire street was named after him. Samantha, look at you. Zach's still loud, I see. Tyler laughed. No one's changed, even after everyone left me here alone. A glass nativity twinkled beneath multicolored fairy lights. Glass baubles hung from the tree instead of the usual plastic reindeer. What's with all the glass? Tyler shrugged. Big department stores were all about colors and plastic this year. Too many glass shards and too many feet after too many glasses of Christmas brandy. A bottle of weak beer appeared in Samantha's hands, just like old times. Samantha wandered towards the nativity. It was the same as her mother's. She had never seen anything like it before. The sound of the party reminded her of high school and longing for simpler times. Everyone here looked so old beneath the strobe lights, except Tyler, who stayed behind. The glass shimmered. Samantha blinked. It wasn't the week beer. Happy hour cocktails chased each other 6 nights of the week. Entertaining clients and signing new ones wasn't in the job description, but she did what she was told. The party hammered on behind her. Someone gave Emily proper DJ equipment. No sudden changes in volume. The drum loop wrapped Samantha in a cold embrace. An invisible belt tightened around her chest, surrounded by people she used to know. She was the only person in the barn. The glass nativity stared without any eyes. 3 blank wise men bearing gifts and an invisible belt restricting her airwaves. Emily pressed a button for bottle fog, and the strobe light changed color behind the haystack. Bar mice ran along the ceiling beams. Baby Jesus stared from a glass manger. His empty eye socket stole Samantha's breath. Her lipstick melted down her chin. Blue lips reflected in the glass. Sam? The voice came from so far away. Sam? Someone tugged on her, goose down Parker. Sam, snap out of it. Fingers clicked beneath her nose. Samantha, come back to me. Tyler came into focus. Samantha's breath came in heavy bursts in sync with Emily's drum loops. Tyler led her outside. Oh, look, it is snowing. Samantha looked up and shuddered. What's wrong, Sam? You used to love snow. It doesn't seem right. Of course it is right. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas if we weren't guessing about whether there'd be snow. Not snow. This snow. This snow? It doesn't seem right. There's something wrong with it. What's gotten into you? Samantha shrugged. She didn't know. She was looking forward to escaping the big city and her manager's unwanted advances for a few days. But now she was back. Something seemed off. She couldn't put her finger on it. Come on, let's get back inside. Samantha cast a backwards glance. Sweat and body odor danced in the ball of fog. She let Tyler lead her to the punch. Non-alcoholic. I remember when you used to demolish 10 beers and still be standing. It wasn't the beer. Some inexplicable need to justify, explain, pulled at her insides. Tyler looked at her with a knowing wink and a shake of his head. Samantha shrunk inside her goose down Parker. Glass baubles twinkled on the tree surrounded by fairy lights. Glass dripped onto the artificial branches. 3 wise men watched from the fake mantle with no eyes, their mouths stretched into screams. Baby Jesus' glass manger melted into the fake snow. 3 wise men twisted in their glass robes. Samantha tapped Tyler's shoulder. He couldn't feel her gentle fingers through his winter jacket. Samantha grabbed Tyler's arm and swung him around. See? Tyler shrugged. Hand-blown glass for you. Emily spun records. Bottle fog blocked views of the glass figurines. Tyler pulled Samantha into the center of the barn to dance the night away, awkwardly avoiding mistletoe. He didn't walk her to the door or kiss her cheeks. He gave her a wink instead. See you soon. Samantha climbed the stairs to the guest room and went straight to bed. She didn't bother with pajamas. Glass faces chased her dreams away. 3 wise men with poisoned glass arrows shot Tyler's eyes. His insides turned to glass and shattered in the night. Samantha woke screaming. Her hands felt like ice. Moonlight shone through the window. Frost climbed the inside wall and wrapped around the fuzzy remains of Samantha's tattered dreams. Toodles barked from the luxury dog bed down the hall. Heaviness climbed through Samantha's fingers and joints. The sound of glass breaking echoed through the house before Samantha registered her index finger was missing right down to where the knuckle met the palm. A final yelp dissolved into white noise. Above all the different sounds, the sound of her parents' bedroom door opening alerted Samantha's ears. 3 eyeless, wise men stood guard from the mantle's Christmas display. The floorboards squeaked beneath her father's footsteps. Toodles? Yellow light poked underneath the crack in the door. Toodles? The floorboards squeaked with her mother's weight. What happened to my baby? Samantha! The bedroom door opened. Is this some sort of joke you're playing? Samantha sat up confused. Yellow light illuminated her glass hands. A stiff chill traced her leg. The father didn't notice her hands. Toodles? White noise dissolved into glass shattering across hardwood floors. Her father left the door frame to investigate. Mourning combined with intense anger rattled the air. Father whimpered. Her mother broke down into sobs. Another finger shattered. This time it didn't go by without notice underneath the yellow hallway light. She tried to scream and found she couldn't draw breath. Designs carved in blue frost crossed the guest room's walls, lit up with warm yellow hallway light. Somewhere in the struggle, Samantha's blankets landed on the floor. Yellow light touched her glass toes. It didn't feel warm against the chill. Samantha clawed at her throat with her remaining fingers until these shattered too. Glass shards fell into her lap and cut her thighs. Blood transformed into glass upon contact with the air. Her lungs begged for air, even though it felt like she had inhaled 1,000,000 serrated knives. Glass shattered up to her wrist. Samantha slit her own throat. Tyler didn't even give her a kiss. 3 wise men stood in darkness with gifts for the newborn king. The office manager's chapped lips puckered up. He pulled her into an embrace and grabbed her butt. "Do as I say, and you'll go far. You don't want to go back to that hick town." Samantha backed up, pushing herself with glass knees against her glass butt. Along her glass butt. The manager's lips loomed over her. She couldn't escape, even dying in her childhood home, but not her bedroom. Her mother's sobs echoed through the house. The office manager dissolved into the frost on the walls. The 3 wise men twinkled on the mantel. Glass couldn't smile. A siren wailed, sliding on ice, lurking beneath the slush outside. Glass shattered inside Samantha's chest and pierced the rest of her skin. Officer Beckett banged on the front door. She could still hear. Frost carved itself into 3 grinning wise men on the guest room wall. Death would be slow, even without her heart. Hallway glass crunched beneath Samantha's father's bare feet. She felt every cut, even without feet of her own. Officer Beckett's radio called in another disturbance from the porch. As her father answered the door, even with the window shut and every other noise, she heard it perfectly. Windows down the street lit up with warm light. Samantha had a front row seat into the source of every scream and sob. Raccoons chattered and dug through the trash. Someone left meat in their Christmas lobster claw. Officer Beckett demanded the day shift get out of bed. 1 officer on night duty was usually enough to drive kids out of the barn and help Tyler's father scrape auto accident victims off tarmac. The neighbor next door fell out of her front door and clutched her throat beneath security lights. Raccoons dug through the trash and couldn't find any more lobster claws. Samantha's father grabbed Officer Beckett and shoved his nose into his face. "My wife, my dog, please, my dog, she just shattered." Officer Beckett shook himself free. Bloodshot eyes stared beneath his winter cap. "This is all just a bad dream. One long bad dream. I'll wake up and it'll be over," the officer mumbled to himself. Raccoons chattered and dug to the bottom of the trash. "Please help me." The neighbor's fingers shattered beneath the security light. The first crisscross of glass traced the cellulite and stretch marks on her legs. Samantha's mother's sobs slowed in the master bedroom. 3 wise men with no eyes dropped their gifts for the newborn king. Raccoons fought over broken Christmas baubles in the bottom of the trash. Everyone else switched to shatterproof colorful plastic. The images all came at once upon what was left of Samantha shattered in the guest room bed. The house felt empty without Toodles and her barks. Mud transformed to glass on the wall where she shook herself off. Slush transformed to ice throughout the small town. Officer Beckett lost his footing and fell off the porch. "You must help me. What do I pay taxes for?" Samantha's father mumbled. The porch cracked objections to his weight. Samantha's father's feet slid. His fingers shattered when he reached for the door frame. He didn't notice his wife stopped sobbing. Sets of 3 wise men sat on every mantel in the small town. No one remembered where they came from, or even if the nativity was pulled out of bubble wrap and boxes for careful displays in every home in the building. Raccoons couldn't chatter with their throats piercing through their fur. Their blood turned to glass as soon as it hit the air. Forgotten food found rotting in bins fell from their glass paws. They couldn't play with smashed baubles anymore. Samantha's father's eyes shattered outwards and pierced Officer Beckett's skin. He took out his gun for the first time since the police academy and shot randomly into the air. Each bullet exploded glass onto slush and ice. Gold-trimmed crimson Christmas ribbons turned to glass and fell from wreaths. Frost climbed inside walls, but it wasn't frost, not really. The images of 3 wise men glared from each wall touched by glass. Officer Beckett's radio broadcast static into the frosty air. The Christmas sun shone on shattered glass. Groups of 3 wise men stood on mantles in every home in Mississippi building, waiting to be taken away by the FBI. All right, and that is my Christmas story. So thank you for sticking around. It was a long one. Bye bye. Happy Christmas.